with me as my eyes adjust from the page out to all of you, so I'll try my best to make eye contact, especially coming off of my first full week back to school and arguing with my alarm clock every morning. I'm really excited to be back with a new batch of second graders. Second grade, as a kid, it's a really big job. It's not easy being 7. There's a lot you have to do. My kids are learning how to have conversations. They're learning how to explore their own questions in order to find out answers. They're learning how to tie their shoes, eat their snack in under 15 minutes, get on the right bus, be brave when they kiss and hug their family on the way to school, remember all of their new friends' names, and they're learning how to adapt to a new teacher's expectations. The whole first week is often spent trying to figure out whether or not to buy into the spiel of the new adult who's standing in front of them. It's a lot. One of the best conversations that my co-teacher and I had with our students last week occurred when we were talking about the reading, writing, math, science, and amazing fun things we're going to do throughout the year. We reviewed basic safety rules, we shared our own values, and we talked about classroom behaviors that we will need in order to have a safe and thriving classroom community. It was a great discussion, and all of the kids seemed to be on board. We were ready to go. Toward the end of the discussion, one of our new students bravely raised his hand and really thoughtfully said, "I have a question. Are capes allowed?" And that's it right there. That type of question represents what kind of year second grade is. It's a very legitimate question. I probably should have posed it to my principal when I was hired because I still don't know if there would be a consequence if I showed up to work wearing one. But the reason I'm sharing this story with you is because although we hadn't completed our first week together yet, the trust was beginning to develop. And that's what our year together is about, trust. Without it, we won't be able to question each other, learn from each other. We won't feel powerful enough to try and discover new things that we never thought we'd be able to do. I teach in an integrated co-teaching classroom. And this means that I'm lucky enough to have a unique and dynamic mix of learners every year. I have students who learn traditionally and at a pace that's aligned with the dictated curriculum. And I have students with individual education plans, IEPs, who learn in very different ways and at very different paces. My job, along with that of my co-teacher, is to make sure that we are able to get inside the many different brains of our kids in order to give each one what she or he needs. It's kind of like going to a concert. We see a production, we hear an orchestrated and organized set of music, we may see a choreographed light show that's all come together, but it's really exciting to have VIP access to the control room. And that's what I get. I get to say to kids, show me what's happening for you, show me how you learn, show me how you think and feel, and where you find your own strength. I want you to trust me to take that information and guide you through an amazing learning adventure. Each child is different, each thought process is unique, and every way of learning is really sacred. There's no standardization when it comes to a group of children, and therefore it's nearly impossible to have a standard, isolated way of accurately measuring what children know. But getting back to trust, I'm one of those people who have many different roles within my school district. I'm a teacher, I'm a unionist, and I'm a parent of 2 kids who attend school in the district where I work. I used to consider this to be a really big challenge, and I would worry about how to handle my own child potentially having difficulty in school, and I would wonder what would happen if and when the district may do something that I don't agree with. But now I find myself using each of these roles to inform the others, and I have become more convinced with each passing year that these roles enable me to be a stronger teacher, a more informed parent, and a brave and vocal unionist. Families send their children to school each day and put trust in us that we will keep their kids happy, energized, learning and involved, but above all else, physically and emotionally safe. This is what I want as a parent, and this is my responsibility as a teacher. Someone trusts me to do everything I can each day to make each child feel like the smartest, most capable, and most loved person. How do I do that? Listen carefully, education reformers. I set very high standards. Woo! I do. I am a teacher. I know what that means. I know what it means to hold standards higher than everybody else. I set them for my students, and I set them for myself and for my colleagues as well. And even though I teach in a primary school, we are mandated to administer tests. Ours is a bit different because unlike grades 3 through 8, our K-2 teachers are responsible for following the parameters of the state while writing the tests ourselves. So my colleagues and I have now spent the time that we usually use to collaborate and learn from each other and plan together on developing test questions. Test questions that we know are not only testing all of our unique kids in the same way, but are also only there to develop a numerical score for teachers.
Yeah. That's right.
In other words, the tests are absolutely meaningless to our children, and they teach us nothing about how our children think, how they plan, self-monitor, self-assess, and how they feel about themselves. There are two awful consequences that came out of the K-2 teachers being charged with coming up with these tests. For the first time ever, my colleagues and I found ourselves having debates about the depth and difficulty of test questions. We followed the requirements of the state and created questions that we knew didn't ask students to share what they know or how they solved problems in the same way that we've been teaching them to do all these years. So we talked about how, in keeping with what we know to be a developmentally appropriate approach to assessing a child's knowledge, do we change the questions? Do we increase the expectations on the test rubric? And it was then that we realized that in order to assure that we weren't going to harm ourselves by affecting this ridiculous and meaningless score that we received, we weren't going to expect the same things on this test that we would normally expect from our children throughout the year. For the first time ever, this group of really smart and really dedicated people decided to stick with questions that didn't feel like they were truly a measure of what our children were learning. This is a devastating way for teachers to work. It's not what we do. Together, we have always worked to increase the outcome for our students, and here we were realizing that this was no longer about our students. It was about an arbitrary measure of our performance. For the first time ever, we were faced with lowering our own standards. The other consequence to having to administer tests at this age brings us back again to trust. All year, we tell our students not to worry about taking chances, not to worry about taking brave leaps, because we promised we would never ask them to do anything that we didn't feel they could handle. We gently coax them into feeling supported enough to try uncomfortable things, because we promise we will be there to catch them, and we mean it. But now the test comes, and we have no choice but to rip the safety net right out. We said we'd help you through anything, but not in this case. We're not allowed. We said we're so proud of how you've learned to work together and collaborate, but not in this case, because now collaboration is called cheating. We said you can always ask us questions and we'll be there to help, but not in this case. We're not allowed to answer your questions. We said we'd give you more time to go at your own pace, but now your little 7-year-old body has been sitting for at least 45 minutes and you can't sit anymore. What a confusing contradiction it is when we passionately agree to stand up for ourselves and our children, but then we continue to accept and work under these imposed standards. We can't simply hope that attacks on teachers, students with disabilities, under-resourced communities, and neighborhood schools will stop. Education reformers will never promote any type of action that would help support or improve public schools for our children. None of these people will help feed hungry students. They won't put money into poor schools, and they won't support improvement in teacher training programs. Multi-million-dollar companies somehow discovered that in the midst of a hurting economy, there was one institution that wasn't being tapped hard enough for money, and that's the institution of public education. Teachers immediately started becoming scapegoats of an education crisis that didn't exist. And by fabricating a crisis that they could blame on teachers and subsequently on students and families, they gave themselves permission to ignore the ongoing and real crisis of poverty and underfunding. So how do we push back? Listen carefully, Campbell Brown. I am a tenured teacher who cares deeply about what I do. It is because of tenure and my right as a working citizen to due process that I can stand up here and say to every family that I work with, I promise to always stand up for your child and advocate for your child and do everything I know in my heart is right to help your child grow and be happy and be safe. I will continue to set high standards that are appropriate for every child. And above all else, I will learn with you, from you, and help you discover how to access your own learning powers. I will laugh with you. I'll teach you how to question, debate, discuss, and deeply care about yourself and who you are in the world. And I will make sure you know that in this case, when this test is put in front of you, you will know that it means nothing as far as who you are or what you're capable of doing. You are and always will be more than any test score. To my fellow colleagues and my students, I say push back. Public education and competition do not go hand in hand. Competition is not okay and it's not fair when everyone doesn't have the same resources and support. Stand up for what each child needs and deserves. And by doing so, we will continue to demonstrate that public education is just not an option. It's the only way we can make sure that every child has an opportunity to reach his or her own beautiful potential. So I'll end with this. Are capes allowed? They're mandatory. Stand up, wear that cape, speak out, and be brave. We are here for each other, and we are here to protect our children. Thank you.